Hello, greetings. I think we'll wait another minute and everybody can get in. It's Women's History Month. Yay. Welcome. Thank you all for coming to the first of our 2 Women History Months webinar, honoring women who advocate for equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And thank you to our sponsors and supporters of this webinar. Their names were listed on the opening credits that you saw. I'm Martha Wheelock, the board president of the National Women's History Alliance, along with our interim executive director, Jill Zincraft, whom you will meet better in the Q&A section. We are so fortunate to have Jill in our transition period after the retirement of our amazing and dedicated leader, Molly Murphy McGregor, who fearlessly and ardently led the Alliance for over 44 years. Some of you remember that it was Molly and a few of her pals who created, instilled, and established Women's History Month beginning in 1978. First, when they celebrated International Women's Day, then a week, and finally a month in 1987. Molly created a movement which honors diverse women so that any woman's voice can be heard now, and she can be known for her contributions. Today, women's history is growing in awareness and invisibility, but albeit really slowly. I mean, M&M's Candy put women's history on their wrapper a while ago, but we got to be bigger than that. About our theme, I'm so often moved when I think upon the power of equity, diversity, inclusion. These are qualities which can have an outcome of people feeling they belong, and eventually that there's justice in the full definition of a democracy. When we choose to apply and center our work, our government, our society on equity, diversity, and inclusion, we bring caring and justice into our worlds, and we make the spaces better and bigger for all of us. The outcome of DEI is a wider, better, and bigger. The world is wider and better and bigger for all of us. The outcome of DEI, the outcome of DEI is a world. Equal opportunities gives everyone a seat at the table and a chance to develop their more and individual talents and tastes. Our decision-making embraces wider and more creative ranges of solutions and answers. We take more risks and share different ideas when we have greater exposure to others' points of view and experiences. Business, education, society, the arts, the sciences, government are all richer, and I really think more beautiful when all the voices can be heard and talents developed. We are multicultural after all. We should be valued. We are encouraged to find what is unique in each of us. And when we can listen to others' stories, we find commonality and understand our differences. We know that women of all races, classes, ages, lifestyles, religions, education, professions are the least known for their achievements and contribute and their contributions to our world. Excuse me. Thus, the reason for the Women's History Alliance to write women back into history and to know our stories. As the late, great Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, we will all profit from a more diverse, inclusive society, understanding, accommodating, even celebrating our differences while we're pulling together for the common good. Today, we are blessed to have 3 extraordinary women who walk the talk of equity, diversity, and inclusion to the point where these qualities become belonging, justice, and a moral imperative. Women have always been at the forefront of diversity, equity, and inclusion, making sure that the poor, the elderly, the sick, the homeless, the outsiders, the immigrants, the underrepresented are receive attention, they receive services, which is what women were always expected to do, until some brave women over the decades demanded that laws and policies be established to make sure that everyone was treated equally and fairly, and an inherent right of our democracy. These presenters will enlighten us with their experiences and how their work has made a difference. Our first presenter today is Dr. Sharon Parker. Sharon, who is of Native and African American heritage, was an early advocate of equality. First as the director of the National Commission on Working Women back in 1977, she went on to be the founder of the National Institute for Women of Color in 1981 to promote the strengths of diversity. This institution advocated for women of color, focusing on a mutual concern of education, housing, healthcare, and pay equity. Their main objectives were to develop leadership skills in women, to recognize women of color leaders, to educate society about the status and basic needs of women of color, to be supportive network, and to advocate for public policy change. Some of Sharon's positions as a diversity consultant are Stanford University, Claremont, and the University of Washington at Tacoma. She's also been a consultant on various diversity initiatives in the nonprofit, educational, and corporate sectors. She's the co-author of the 2007 monograph, Making a Real Difference with Diversity, a Guide to Institutional Change. Please welcome Dr. Sharon Parker. Your turn, Sharon. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. You just gave my presentation. I can just hang up now. I'm gonna pull up my slideshow. If you bear with me a moment, I have to say share. Oh, now it's doing something very strange. Well, this didn't happen when we practiced. Let me try again. Do you see anything blinking? I'm so sorry. I see something blinking all over the place here. Do you see that?
Sharon, I don't see anything.
Oh, how terrible. I don't know what happened here.
We get to see you.
Well, I'm afraid to hit the wrong button because I might lose you.
Let me try removing your spotlight and see if that changes it for you.
Well, I think I've figured out how to do it just now. I'm so sorry to lead off with such a, let me press share screen again. And
you're worth waiting for.
Okay, is it sharing now?
Yes.
Great. And the only thing we want to do is have it as a slideshow and not as a screen. While I'm waiting for this thing to come to life in the proper way, of course, when we practiced, it was perfect. Martha asked me, how did you get into this work? So I said, well, it's who I am. It's how I lived. It's how I was raised. And that's why I started the slide, which I hope you're seeing now.
Yes.
Okay. With the information about my parentage and where I grew up. I think it's important for people to know that I grew up in Washington, D.C., which then was not only the nation's capital, but most people thought of it as the world capital. So it was full of lots of international visitors and people from all over the states. And I feel that I had a very unique and wonderful education by living in that environment and by having the parentage that I had, so that I had a very broad view and deep understanding of people from many backgrounds. This led me to study languages. I loved learning about people through their culture, and that meant that you learn their languages. And that led me to study in Mexico and also the Soviet Union. After moving on from that wonderful education and life in Washington, D.C., where I was exposed to so much, I found myself living in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I went to a conference. I'm not sure what motivated me to go to this conference. Maybe it was Kismet. But there I heard this absolutely fabulous woman speak. And it was Audrey Rowe Colomb, whom you see pictured there. She was then the president of the National Women's Political Caucus. And I was just blown away by her. I had no idea that she was so insightful, and she stimulated me and impressed me. And here was, you know, a Black woman being the head of the National Women's Political Caucus, and saying that something about the experience she had that resonated with my life. And not only that, well, I think what came out of that is not only did I have this great appreciation for cultures and languages, but it linked then to issues of justice. And I attribute my entrance into the world of feminism to Audrey Rowe Colomb. That, of course, I was in New Mexico. That led me to be involved with the National Women's Political Caucus in Albuquerque and the state, and also NOW, the National Organization for Women. And I want you to know that it was easy to belong to both and be active in both, because we were very tiny then. I mean, we're talking about the 70s. And we were interested in issues of childcare, reproductive health, economic status, and that led us to connect with the New Mexico Commission on Women, which was just a fabulous organization at that time, and I'm sure it still is. And one of the issues that emerged was about displaced homemakers. You don't hear about displaced homemakers that much today, but then it was a major issue for women in New Mexico. We had many women come and testify to us about their status as a displaced homemaker. These are women who were abandoned or divorced and left destitute by their spouses, by their husbands. So there was a movement to build economic status support for these women. And it became a national movement, which was led by these two wonderful women you see pictured here, Lori Shields and Tish Summers. They took the issue all the way to Washington, D.C. and testified before Congress. And I got to know them both because I was bold enough to be the spokesperson in New Mexico on this issue. I moved on to Washington, D.C. again, this time as an adult, previously as a young person, but here I am as an adult. And because of my interest in these issues and my outspokenness, I went to the National Now board meetings. I went to the National Women's Political Caucus meetings. And with NOW, I had the help of two wonderful women who were then serving on the board, two women of color, Latinas, to advocate for the establishment of a minority women's committee. So these flyers show you that we got such a committee established. And it wasn't long after that that somehow I became the chair of the Minority Women's Committee. What I want to point out here also is that at that time, we were still talking about minority women. And that was the common phrase used in the country. So we used that to talk about feminism, to talk about a shared struggle, racism and sexism. Also at that time, anything about the women's movement was generally talked about women in general. So we brought out the issues that impacted women of color, or then as they were called, minority women. And it was also the time for ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. So there was a big push on to get states to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. And you see that we developed that flyer for that. And we held meetings to educate women and to bring them into more knowledge in almost the same way that Audrey inspired me to share the message with other women across the country, and especially women of color. So I put this little collage together to show you some of the leading women at that time. This is in the 70s and early 80s. In the little picture at the top left, you see three women. The one on the far left is Eileen Hernandez, who was the first Black woman to head NOW. And she was just a brilliant woman who had great skills and leadership abilities. But somehow after her term, she was also a co-founder of NOW. She seemed to be lost in the history of the women's movement until we had her come to Washington, D.C. to speak. Next to her is Dolores Huerta, who was I'd say the wind behind the wings of Cesar Chavez and the farm workers movement. Dolores is another brilliant woman, a brilliant speaker who in her 90s today still can hold your attention at the podium and speak strongly for justice and the rights of women. That other little person you see in the corner is me. I looked a little differently then. And the next slide, whether you see three people standing together under the cherry blossoms, that woman in the middle is Jean Sadako King. She was the lieutenant governor of the state of Hawaii. And she too was a big advocate for women's rights and looked at the diverse women in her constituency. She came to our meeting in DC and wanted to see the cherry blossoms, so we took her there. Of course, you recognize Gloria Steinem. Gloria was and is a strong advocate, not only for women, but particularly for women of color. And we continue to honor and love her for that. In the middle is Suzanne Schoen Harjo, another great leader, Native woman, and someone who was more recently honored by former President Barack Obama with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And the last one you see pictured is LaDonna Harris, who was then the wife of Fred Harris, US Senator from Oklahoma. But LaDonna used that position to speak out in her own right for women, for Native women, for Comanche women. And I just had to show you these few because they were some of the most outstanding women of that era. And you notice I've started using the term women of color. I'll come back to that in a minute. From that work with NOW and the commissions and NWPC and getting to know Lori and Tish, when I went to DC, they told me to look up this organization that was getting started. And I did, and I became hired there to help establish this new organization, which was called the Commission on Working Women, NCWW. At this time, again, we're talking about the 80s, not only were people talking about women in general and not, looking at them in disparate ways by culture and ethnicity and race and so forth, but also women were only seriously considered if they were professionals, doctors or lawyers. So the majority of women in the workforce were in sales and clerical and factories and plants and service jobs, and those jobs were pretty much ignored. So this organization was established to bring awareness that the vast majority of women workers at that time, we called them the 80%, were in these jobs, and their voices needed to be heard. You see in one of my slides that we did fact sheets to help people become aware of who these workers are and where they were and what they did. And I was the one designated to write most of the fact sheets because I love to research and read and study and so forth. And you see on the far right, two flyers. It's actually a report. We did regional meetings around the country, in every region of the country, to hear from working women, to hear what they were I was going to say experiencing and suffering. We made a report after each one of these regional meetings and shared them broadly. You see the one in Seattle was co-sponsored by the Office of Women's Rights from the Seattle Women's Commission. So we continued to work with women's organizations and legal organizations that represented the issues of women so that there could be change made. And that is what happened out of a lot of these meetings. From that, I'm moving fast, so forgive me. We realized, some of my colleagues and I realized that we needed more attention to the populations of women of color. We had moved from talking about minority women because that was limiting. That gave us most people a concept of lesser than. And we wanted people to understand that these are women from disparate groups who may share some history, but have different cultures and different experiences. So two wonderful women, and joined later by others, helped me to establish what became the National Institute for Women of Color, NIWC. So I left the commission and went to work for the National Institute for Women of Color. And you see this fact sheet that's there is on pay equity. So if you notice, there's a theme going from my early days in New Mexico to my later days in the nation's capital, looking at economic status issues for women. The blue brochure is simply to show you about the establishment of the National Institute and the fact that we started out doing national strategies conferences every year because there was so much for women to share. It was so exciting for us to come together and to hear from great speakers and leaders like some of the ones I showed you earlier. This was a very heady time when change was possible and people listened. It wasn't as divided or as visibly divided as today politically, but it was a time of great change, moving from women in general to looking at women in their cultures, races, ethnicities, moving from lumping everyone together as a minority to understanding that there are different groups. This organization that we founded, the National Institute for Women of Color, tried to carry this notion on through, and we produced a series of brown papers because we wanted, in addition to bringing people together in live conferences, to be able to share the information about who are these women, what have we contributed to the US. And so we did a series. You see some of the titles there. Women of Color in the American Political System, recognizing some of the earliest women leaders in politics. Economic status again, and this one focused on Navajo women. We did one on intercultural systems, and it's among Asian and Pacific women. A little footnote here is that at that time, most people talked about Asian American as a lump sum, and we began to talk about Asian American and Pacific Islander. Today, we're so far ahead, Pacific Islanders are even broken out into the various groups when we talk about who they are and look at census data and so forth. Health practices, it continues to be an issue as more women of color experience difficulties in childbirth than their counterparts, difficulties in getting the kind of health care that's needed throughout all the different communities. So that was another thing we did. Well, moving on in the Sharon Parker life, um, from that work, I managed to move on to head up the American Institute for Managing Diversity, which is the first diversity institute in the country. It was located in Atlanta, Georgia, so I went to Atlanta, and we did studies, and we did fact sheets, and we did workshops to help people understand the issues of diversity. What appealed to me was that it continued to look at disaggregating, as we say in the field, disaggregating the groups, disaggregating the data, so that you can see the status of different people and what's needed. Okay, whoops, put a little something there you didn't need. And eventually, as Martha Wheelock told you, I went on to work in colleges and universities sharing this information. When I first started, you see it up in the upper right corner, people were still talking about multiculturalism. They weren't talking about diversity. The term was multiculturalism. So I became the first multicultural director at Stanford University, working under the president. And that was, again, a heady, exciting time. And from there, I went to various other places, but wound up at Claremont Graduate University for 6 years, where we studied how to make institutional change in educational institutions. And what you see pictured is one of our brochures or briefs, as we called them, and that when was looking at faculty at these institutions, and we looked at students, and we looked at how the campuses address their issues of diversity, and what what succeeded and what didn't succeed, and that resulted in that what document in the middle called Making a Real Difference with Diversity, which was published, I believe, in 2007. So you see, I'm moving up in time now, so you don't have to hang on to your seats for too much longer. I wound up at the University of Washington in Tacoma, which is why Martha asked me if I'm in Tacoma. It was a wonderful place to be. And I served there for 10 years as their first diversity officer. So the answer to the question of how did I get into this, you've now heard, but with each step, there was more learning to be done and more sharing to be done, more research. And today, of course, we're even farther along. I admire looking at so many of the works that come out in research documents and also in popular publications, that there's such a greater understanding of issues of diversity, issues of representation. But what ultimately was so important to me is understanding how to change our institutions. Because without changing the institutions, we just keep doing the same thing over and over and over. I think I have one more slide. Yeah, but this one I labeled past as prologue. These are all sort of topics that I just sort of picked out of my documents that I spoke to throughout the years. And I just threw them up there because it seems to me we're back to defining these things again. We're back to sharing these things again. We're back to educating people. In this time of great political division, educating people about why we do this, why it's necessary, who are the people who made changes, where is the role of women in all of this? How do we honor our ancestors and move forward into the future? All of these things are important to think about as we move forward, and perhaps we can talk about some of this in the Q&A.
Yeah.
But there's one more quick thing I want to say before I leave you, and that's all of this work was very hard. I may have breezed through it quickly for you and left out lots of stories, but it was very hard. It was hard to be the first one doing any of these things. And I think it's very hard again now as we have to face the backlash for diversity issues and for people of color, and especially women. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you so much. What a pathfinder. What a pathfinder. And we can take out all the datas that you had and had give us courage to keep going with all the stuff you started us with. Thank you so much. You can see that this is where the history began in many ways. Next, we have Pamela Richards, currently the president of Federally Employed Women. And she has an extraordinary life of service and advocacy, mostly around the federal government. And she is an investigatory research analyst at the Government Accountability Office. She serves as a committed member on the FAIS Respect, Equity, Accessibility, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. And FAIS stands for Forensic, Audit, and Investigative Services. I've been trying to say that word all day. She's also part of the Women's Liaison Group and the Veterans Affairs Liaison Group. And over the span of her federal career, Ms. Richards has worked closely with the EEO office and senior level management, cultivating relationships to assist in developing EEO and compliance policies, as well as equal advancement of women within agencies. And those of you who don't know EEO, it is Equal Employment Opportunity. She's overseen issues of needs from poverty, homelessness, juvenile justice, and worked for others during the government shutdown. And she has won many awards for her servant leadership skills. Are you up, Pamela Pamela Richards, sorry, thank you.
Yes, ma'am, I am. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you just perfectly.
Awesome. So let me, all right. It is. All right. Thank you, Martha, for such a warm welcome. Thank you, Jill, as well for the invite to be here with you all tonight and to talk about a prestigious professional women's organization that I truly love. As Martha stated, I am the 25th National President of Federally Employed Women, where we are an organization that has 10 regions and we have 2,900 members, where we are women who advocate for equity, diversity, and inclusion. Can everyone see my slides? We're good. Can I get a thumbs up?
We can see your slides perfectly.
Sounds great. So what I'll be doing for you tonight is to just tell you a little bit about FEW. There's not enough time tonight to tell you all about the fabulous things that we have done in the arena of advocacy, but just want to share a few tidbits about who we are, what we do, and what we are continuing to do as we push the needle forward in diversity, equity, inclusion, and working toward the advancement of women in government. And so here's my agenda for tonight. I will share with you what is FEW, the background and history of the organization. I'll talk about our very first president and my FEW story. And then I also will talk about upcoming opportunities that we have and that we offer as being a member of FEW. And we do offer some things that if you're not a member of FEW, we do have some training opportunities that are open across the globe. Just have to sign in and be a part of our listserv. And so now what is FEW? FEW is a private nonprofit organization where we are a membership base, where you pay $45 for membership to be a part annually. We have diamond and lifetime membership categories as well as we have an associate membership category. And I'll share more about that as I go along. Oftentimes people get us confused and think we are a labor organization, but we're not. We are in allyship with our federal agencies. We do not go and represent anyone. We do have one of the membership benefits is that if you should have an EEO complaint within your organization or need to file one within your organization and you need some consultation, we have a partnership with Tully and Rigney where you can they will provide a 30-minute free consultation to you as being a member of federally employed women. Now, we are a 3-tier influential organization where we have a 3-tier influence. And our first tier is that we consider the utmost importance of female federal workers. Then we deal with issues that impact federal workers as a whole, regardless of gender, and that to include compensation, employee benefits, Hatch Act reform, and the National Performance Review, safety and health. And then we also have tier 3 issues, and that those issues are where women as a class and include economic empowerment, healthcare, and violence against women, the Equal Rights Amendment, voter education, registration activities, and given overall priority status as they permeate each and every issue above. Now, our organization FEW is open to all. It is open to anyone who subscribes to the purposes of this organization and is willing to carry out that mission. Now, we do not discriminate. Our goal is to increase allyship in the federal workforce. We are mission driven, as I stated before. Our tagline, working for the advancement of women in government. And our mission is federally employed women works to end sex and gender discrimination, encourage diversity for the inclusion and equity in the workplace, and for the advancement and professional growth of women in federal service. Not only do we look at professional growth, but we do also look at personal growth as well. So we do provide personal training to our membership, as well as those that would like to attend. It's not totally closed out to our membership. Anyone can attend our trainings as well. Our background in history, FEW is 56 years old this year. We are super excited about us being 56 years old. Last year, we were the double nickels and we celebrated in Columbus, Ohio, being 55 years old, but we are now turning 56. And we were founded in 1968 on the issuance of Executive Order 11375. And that is to end sex and gender discrimination. Now, and also we have continued over the years to improve the status of women. Now, I mentioned earlier, our very first president, Miss Allie Latimer, she is still with us. Miss Allie is still with us, still kicking and still thriving, still advocating for the rights of women down at the grassroots level. One thing that she has always instilled in us is that we have to get down there on boots on the ground and advocate from the ground up. And that is getting into the agencies, that's getting out into the community and continue to advocate to improve the status of women. Now, 13 women decided to be a part of this to start this organization some 56 years ago. And now we are still standing 56 years later, and we're looking to be around 56 more years, okay? And then some. Miss Allie, she was our first national president. And when you ask her, she just had a birthday. And when you ask her how old she is, she won't tell you, but she tells me, this is her statement, that she and Jesus were in the 3rd grade together. So we can only imagine how old she is, right? She just won't tell us. She went to the Hampton Institute and the Howard University graduate. She's a federal attorney and general counsel, one of the first African-American women who, and the first woman to serve as a general counsel at a major federal agency, as well as the first African-American and first woman to attain the GS 18 salary level back then, okay, back then, at the General Service Administration. And oftentimes the GSA, they go and get her doing Women's History Month, bring her back in and show her all of the things that they have done over the years and how things has changed. And she loves that visit every year. But, you know, as we know, she's gotten older and, you know, COVID, the pandemic has kind of slowed her down a bit, but we still call her on the phone, still check in with her. and see if there's anything she needs. And we mail her all of the updates as it relates to Few, because she says she doesn't get on this magic motion machine, which is the computer. She still has her flip phone, but she's still able to talk. But we are super excited about her. She is a civil rights activist and a humanitarian. She has been active in both legal and civil, civic, and religious activities throughout her lifetime. And she's very instrumental in starting our organization as one of the founding presidents until 1969. She's also been inducted into the New York Women's Hall of Fame in Seneca Falls. We are so excited about her as having her as part of our organization. And I believe me, her picture, she still looks that great when she comes around. And she used to travel to all of our national training programs, which I'll share with you a little bit later what that is. And she used to travel by herself. And she was going to New York one day. We were in Philly. And I said, Miss Allie, where are you going? She said, oh, I'm about to get on this train and go up to New York so that I can get this award that I'm going to be presented. So she had already set up her cab, already was getting ready to go to the train station from Philadelphia by herself. And you know, we did not allow that to happen once we found out she had to go. So we sent someone with her, but believe me, she still will travel in a heartbeat to get where she needs to be to continue the advocacy that she's doing for women. Now I will share with you my Few story. I can, let me see, I'm sorry, clicking too fast. I will share with you my Few story. I did not actually join Few when I first came into the government. I am prior military veteran. I was served my country 5 years. I was a military police officer, and my first duty station was in San Antonio. And after that, I went to Germany, and where I spent 10 years of my life over there. Beautiful time in Europe. I got to travel the world, got to travel to different countries. But during that time is when I entered into the federal government. I first started out as a secretary, an office manager at DODEA. My son did not like it because I was a secretary at his school. So if he ever got in trouble, I would be there and be one of the first ones to see him when he came into the office, right? So he hated that fact. But that was my humble beginnings of being in the office as a secretary. Then the office manager left, and she PCS with her husband, and he was the principal. And I then got that job from a GS4 to a GS5 as an office manager there at the Darmstadt Elementary School. And from there, that was an opportunity that I was going to school as a single parent. I had already gotten out the military, was allowed to stay in Germany, and I was taking criminal justice courses and still working and figuring out I need to do something with my career, something with my life. I got to do something. And they said, if you stay in Germany, one of the quickest ways to get into the government is remain in Europe. So I chose to believe what they said, and it did pan out. So a few years later, I had an opportunity to interview for a job at the 104th ASG IG office, and it was a GS9. And many people told me I would not be able to jump from a 5 to a 9, but it was a different series, and I was able to jump from that 5 to the 9, got in as a 9, served my time there. Then it was time to leave as the government began to do downsizing and was moving down to 30% of their personnel in Europe. And I was on that chopping block, and I had to go because they said, you've been here long enough. You've enjoyed the travel. You enjoyed the fine food and things like that, and all the shopping that comes with it. They said, now it's time to go. So it was right in time for my son, who was already at the age of going into high school. And so I said, well, it's time to take him to the United States so he can enjoy high school and start out and be able to graduate with his class. So I was excited, put on priority placement, began to think about where I'm going to go. Because, you know, when you're on priority placement, you don't accept that first job, you're subject to termination. And I always wanted to go live in Atlanta, but somebody said, oh, go to Albany, Georgia. Albany, Georgia is real close to Atlanta. Until I got there to Atlanta, got to Albany, Georgia, and realized that Albany, Georgia is 2.5 hours southwest of Atlanta. So that was not going to happen where my dream job of going to Atlanta. That's when McPherson was closing, other things were closing. So I settled in Albany for 5 years. Again, still had not heard about Few. Been in Albany 5 years, served as Deputy Inspector General for the Marine Corps. Imagine that, coming from the Army and working for the Marines. I was an Army civilian for years. I was in the Army. I was an Army soldier. And now I'm about to become a Marine civilian. And if you notice, Marines put Marine civilian first. Army for civilian Army employee. I was like, okay, how is this going to work out? Because, you know, we're combative with each other, friendly competition when it comes to the armed forces. But one of the best duty stations that I've ever had is joining with those band of sisters and brothers who welcomed me with open arms. I had to learn the Marine Corps way, and they made sure I learned that Marine Corps way. And then I realized that, you know, Albany, Georgia was a homestead place, a homestead base where you get out the Marine Corps, retire, go work in the civilian world. What many promotional opportunities. So I then decided, okay, let me move up to the DMV area where I am right now and have been now for the last 15 years, going on this year. So I said, all right, I came up and worked for the Department of Army, went back home, and then saw another promotional opportunity and went to Pretrial Services Agency. And when I arrived at pretrial, they said, here's a packet, here's the training where you can go to that we will approve. I go through the training booklet and I find federally employed women, and they begin to talk about their national training program. I said, well, why not? I said, women, I'm for it. I get to Philadelphia, which is my first NTP, the National Training Program, and I decide then, I looked into the room as I came into the hotel, and there was a room full of women celebrating each other, excited about learning, excited about training. They were on stage. It was bling, jeans and bling, and they had diamonds and they had their cowboy hats on. I was so excited. I said, I want to be a part of this organization. Had a very phenomenal training experience there in Philadelphia. I had never been, but it was a truly phenomenal training experience. And after that, I said, okay, let me see about this when I get back to my agency. When I got back to my agency, I joined the Federal Triangle chapter. And when I joined the Federal Triangle chapter, I entered into assistant VP position. Later on, moved into the president and served that chapter about 3 or 4 years. And then the DC Metro Regional manager position came open, which is the regional manager over the largest region of FIU, which is 26 chapters. And I began to be the regional manager. And then one day my mentor said, I can see you being, I never forget it. It was Women's Equality Day. We were celebrating in NOAA. And she said, I can see you being the next national president. I had no thought of it, but then I started to believe it. I said, yes, I can. And so that started my journey and where it positioned me for national impact. Now, I got promoted probably about 2 years on my job, and I've been at GAO about 8 years now. And the question, of course, they always ask you, when is the last time that you supervised? Well, I had not supervised since I left the previous agency. But one thing I thought about was I do supervise in my volunteer when I was as the regional manager for the DC Metro region. And so I began to share with my boss just how much I supervise, what my budget is, and now what my budget is as the national president and becoming the 25th national president, and a $2.5 million budget. And I was able to share with him then what my volunteer work that I do to working toward the advancement of women allowed me to get promoted on my job. So I am super excited about the impact that FIU has made on not only my personal life, but my professional life. So come to FIU if you want to be a leader. If you're on your job, you're not leading, we have leadership positions open just for you, just for you. Now, our upcoming opportunities, we have networking, we have training. You've heard me talk about our national training program. Our national training program is coming up August the 4th through the 8th, 2024, and we are headed to the Windy City of Chicago. Chicago awaits you. We are super excited about the classes that we have centered around OPM, KSAs, that you'll be able to apply this on your resume and be able to let your boss know exactly how these training classes will impact you as an individual and make you a better leader within their organization, and how you will take the skills that you've learned to be able to apply them there and better further the mission and vision of that organization. We have partnerships with several other organizations, such as Blacks in Government, such as LULAC, which is a Latino organization, Employee Resource Group. We have FAPAC, which is the Federal Asian Pacific Islander, and we have Young Government Leaders. We network across them. We meet quarterly and talk about how we can band together to continue to push the need of DEI and A. We have Advocacy Day. We're going to go up on the hill, and we're going up on the hill just to say thank you to the persons, congressional representatives that support FEW, that support the agenda of federally employed women. And we don't support one particular party over the other. We're just going to say thank you all the way around. We have Leveling Up the Success series that we have throughout the year, which is training opportunities that we're excited that if you want to be a part of it and attend those training events, please do so. Please reach out to me. At the end of this presentation, I'll be happy to share with you how to get to those training, get connected with those training opportunities.
Thank you. Yay.
Engage with FEW. And if you want to engage with us, we have our FEW blog, we have our FEW podcast, we're on all social media platforms. Please join us here. Look at our website on few.org. Email us here. Here's our phone number. Please contact us if you have any questions. If your agency wants to start a chapter, please let us know, and we are happy to come out and be to talk to you about federally employed women. So thank you, Martha. Thank you, Jill.
Great.
Thank you to the wonderful colleagues that I've served on this panel with for this wonderful opportunity.
Wow. And thank you for telling us about this wonderful organization and your deep work and your story. I really appreciate it. By the way, we will send out materials that are in this webinar, as well as a copy of the recording to you by email. And it looks like we might not have time for questions and answers, but before we have one more wonderful speaker, that's Mary-dith Tuitt, who comes to us from Montserrat Island today. And she first of all was in the Navy for 14 years, where she was the first African-American aviation machinist. Then she goes back and works in the government in Boston. And I'm kind of doing this quickly, Mary-dith, I'm sorry. But presently
That's
she
all
serves
right.
as the president of the National Association of Commissions for Women, as well as the Massachusetts Commission on the Status of Women. These are wonderful groups that she's going to tell us about. And one of the things she says that she's always been involved and active with organizations and groups that focus on veterans and women's issues. So congratulations to all of the things you do. And thank you for being here today on such a long journey. So here, take it away. We look forward to hearing from
I'll
you.
take it away. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Miss Martha. I know I'm watching the clock, so I know I have 8 minutes to go before, because we want to be mindful. We want to be mindful of all the women who have logged on to this webinar and make sure that we don't go past what we expected them to attend. So as Ms. Martha says, my name is Mary-dith Tuitt. I'm president of the National Association of Commissions for Women. I'm vice chair of the Massachusetts Commission on the Status of Women. I am vice president on the board for Massachusetts Suffrage 100, which is going to be changed to the Massachusetts Women's History Center on the 22nd of this month. So I wear many hats. I'm a United States Navy veteran, commander of my American Legion post. But I'm here because I am all about advocating for diversity, inclusion, and equity for women and young women across the nation, not just in my home state and my city. One of the reasons why Ms. Martha says that I'm coming to you from the island of Montserrat, I ended up having to travel down here for a family funeral. So I am on a tropical island right at the moment, trying to talk to you before the rest of my family comes bombarding into the room. But we are here to talk about impact of commissions across the nation, not just in your local city and state. I have a PowerPoint, but I'm going to jump in and I'm going to share some of the slides with you and try to move forward with the conversation and the presentation, right? So as many of you know, and Dr. Parker talked about women's commissions and the creation of them. I wanted to tell you about the overview of the National Association of Commissions for Women. In 1961, when the President's Commission on the Status of Women was created, we grew out of that. I'm going to jump forward and I'm going to talk about how in 1962, when the Commission on the Status of Women was established in Michigan, that was the first state that had a women's commission. Fast forward, we jump into 1975 when the National Associations of Commissions for Women was established. It was a peak time. There was about 230 members to the commission at the time, right? Hold on a second. I'm so sorry. So we did well when it wasn't my time to speak. As soon as it was my time to speak, some of my family members did walk by, right? So as we progressed and we became the NACW in 1975, we decided we were going to continue and building our association and bringing other commissions on board. At that time, we were 230 members in the association. We are now going through, I see my vice president of the NACW is on, and that's our membership chairperson. And we are now going through our list to make sure that we grow our numbers back. We're down to about maybe 65 of commissions that are on the association still. And the reason why, we have lost a lot of our commissions. If you see this map, you'll see where we have statutory commissions, we have governor's commissions, we have women's advocacy agencies, and so on. But a lot of our states are not hosting or having women's commissions because they cut them because of budgets, they cut them because they felt they were not relevant, and so on. So I want to talk about the fact that there are many states such as Massachusetts and California who have larger numbers of commissions. In Massachusetts, we have the Massachusetts State Commission, we have 11 regional commissions, and we have 9 municipally located commissions. And we just had a new one that was just created just this month in one of our townships in our city. So we want to talk about how do we grow the numbers of commissions back, bring them back. And that's part of what the NACW is about, right? We want to protect the women's commissions. Our current challenges, as I said, some states feel that they are not relevant. Some states believe that they could be absorbed into other agencies like a DCF and or councils or gender councils and so on. And that's some of the issues that we are seeing across the nation. The NACW feels that if we increase the awareness of needs to the women's commissions, and while we're doing that, we're talking about the equity, we're talking about the inclusion, we're talking about the diversity. When we talk about we need a commission in a state or a city or a township that's invited us in, we try to foster positive relationships with our legislators in all of the different areas, federally and locally, to get support for the commissions. And this helps to create a strong community support system between states through our NACW membership. NACW membership is a sliding scale. It goes by your budget, by how much your budgetary dollars are. If you don't have a budget, it's only $50 annually. But part of what we are excited about with our membership is that when we have our convenings and we come together to share our best practices and talk about issues, we are a resource for all other commissions to come together to talk about how do we achieve diversity? How do we achieve equity? How do we achieve inclusion? How do we empower our young women in our colleges to create CSWs? How do we bring our allies? I was just having a conversation today with a young Mr. Castle about how bringing allies on, which is our male counterparts, and be able to work with us about our future vision. Our future vision is to increase our online presence of our strength of our women's commissions, to encourage our membership to create an organized structure that would be able to assist all members of the NACW. And you don't have to be a member of the NACW for us to assist you. If you're a women's organization, we have partnerships with NOW. We are part of the Equal Rights Amendments Coalition. We have partnership with Zonta. We have a variety of different organizations, all Alaska and Hawaii, Puerto Rico, all over that we collaborate with when it comes to doing benchmark reports or doing studies on issues that are impacting women and support that we need to do. I truly believe that if we stay together and work on the mission together, then we'll be able to accomplish so much for our women across the world, not just in the United States of America. Women's commissions, women's councils, women's organizations are truly important. Women of color. It's very important that we have these conversations. If we share our best practices to be able to achieve success on impact and change that we need across the states and across the nation. I'm hoping, I know I went through very quickly because I really truly want to be able to support Miss Martha and the Alliance on Ending on Time. I see that my Vice President Kitty Asbury has, from the great state of Oklahoma, has dropped her contact information into the chat. And if you would like to be able to chat with her, her email is in there also. And I truly want to applaud Dr. Parker, because without sisters like you that have created these paths for us to be on, myself and Sister Richards, we wouldn't be able to advocate for women and young girls across our states and across the nation without the sisters like you that started the mission for us. So I want to thank you, and thank you for all that you've done. Miss Martha, I want to say kudos to Women's History Alliance, because we will constantly be, and I know you ladies know we have a lot on this webinar, and I hope that everyone will go online, go to the nacw.org and visit us. Just come to one of our meetings, and good luck to everyone.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists. Now we just all have to hold hands and join up, and don't let our voices stop because they're trying to get rid of us, women, or women in diversity in Texas and Florida. And we really, really thank you, three of you. And one of the things that we will do is to take the questions from the chat, and we will answer them. We'll send them to the panelists if they don't mind just offering a quick question back. And we will put that in a resource guide, which will accompany this recording. And thank you, Mary-dith, for honoring Dr. Sharon Parker, because it is, and women like you and women like Pamela Richards, who give us the courage to keep on going when they try to take it away from us, where we find out that there are these wonderful groups, the little meetings that Dr. Parker mentioned, the three of them at the table, and the data that they got. That's what we can do. If anyone says, well, what can we do? That's what we can do. And we always have to vote, please. And if you need further material, the National Women's History Alliance.org is a place to get your Women's History Month balloons and your sashes and everything that you might need. And we thank you heartily from the bottom of our hearts for being here. There's a couple of slides at the end of this talk, but thank you again. And come back. There's another one about moving our women's issues to the future, and that is on March 27th. We'll be sending out another invitation for that webinar. Thank you. I'm sorry I'm coughing. Okay, bye-bye.